Previously on the Silent Disruptor. Jonah Vance built Echo to answer one problem, a market that showed institutions everything and ordinary people almost nothing. It worked. 26,000 independent nodes, no company to sue, no server to unplug. 4 firms tried to kill it anyway, coordinated shutdowns, a Senate hearing, a founder who broke under pressure and handed over the map of where Echo's redundancy actually lived. Echo survived the lawsuit. The court let it stand, on the condition its public-facing edges register like any other market platform. Jonah thought that was the ending. He was 19. He had no idea the fight that mattered most hadn't started yet, and that somewhere, a federal directorate nobody had heard of had already been watching for longer than Echo had existed. A retired schoolteacher in Dayton, Ohio, gets a knock on her door from 2 people who never say which agency they work for. They already know her name. They already know which room in her house her router sits in. She has never spoken to a reporter, never testified anywhere, never done anything except install a piece of free software 2 years ago to get a fair price on her retirement fund. Somebody built a map of her before she ever built a profile. This is the season Echo learned that the scariest opponent isn't the one who sues you. It's the one who never has to. A routine third-party security audit of Echo's anonymized node telemetry turns up something no one on the team built, a shadow index cross-referencing anonymous node IDs with real-world street addresses. Every quarter, Echo pays an outside firm to try to break its own anonymization. This was supposed to be routine. Instead, the auditor found a second index sitting quietly alongside Echo's own, a file that shouldn't have existed, mapping 26,000 anonymous node identifiers to physical addresses, built from patterns Echo's own engineers had never thought to hide: power draw timing, router latency, the rhythm of when a household's internet traffic spiked. Nobody at Echo built that file. Somebody outside it had been quietly reconstructing it for over a year. Nia Okafor pulls the intrusion logs herself and recognizes the shape of the work immediately: patient, disciplined, invisible to every alarm Echo had ever built. Nia had spent 3 years designing Echo to notice when something touched it. This hadn't touched anything. Whoever built the shadow index had queried Echo's public telemetry feeds exactly as slowly as a human researcher would, spaced across 14 months, never once tripping a rate limit. A hacker wants to get in and get out, Nia told Jonah at 1 a.m., staring at a timeline stretched across 2 monitors. This wasn't in a hurry. This was funded. Cross-referencing the shadow index against Echo's own records, Jonah and Nia find a name they recognize: Margaret Ilves, a retired schoolteacher who joined Echo 18 months ago, flagged first on the unknown list. Of 26,000 names, hers came first, not alphabetically, not by account size, but by some priority nobody outside the shadow index could explain. Margaret Ilves had joined Echo to get a fair price on a modest retirement account, the same story as 1,000 other users. She had never posted online about it, never spoken to a reporter, never done anything except run the software. Jonah stared at her name for a long moment. "She's real," he said quietly. "Whatever this is, it's not about data anymore." Shown the intrusion pattern, Arthur Pembroke goes quiet in a way Jonah has never seen. He recognizes the discipline of it from his decades inside market regulation. Arthur had reviewed 1,000 suspicious data patterns across 30 years of government work. He looked at this one for 11 seconds and didn't say anything clever. "I've seen data collected like this exactly once before," he finally said. "Not from a hedge fund. From an agency with a mandate nobody votes on." Jonah asked which agency. Arthur said he didn't know anymore. The program he remembered had been shut down on paper years ago. "On paper," he repeated, "is doing a great deal of work in that sentence." Marcus Sterling, having lost the lawsuit, has quietly repositioned Sterling Capital's data analytics arm as a federal contractor, meeting an unnamed government liaison over dinner. Marcus Sterling had stopped suing Echo the day the verdict came down. He had not stopped thinking about it. Over dinner with a liaison from an office he'd been told, twice, not to name aloud, he signed nothing. Men like Sterling never sign anything at the table, but he did say one sentence a waiter overheard and repeated to no one who mattered: "I don't need to own the network. I just need someone who does need to own it." The liaison smiled and ordered dessert. Jonah overrides a suggestion to quietly patch the vulnerability and stay silent. He insists on a full internal investigation, telling the team the truth before they have all the answers. Someone on the legal team suggested patching the exposure quietly and saying nothing, standard practice, defensible, over in a week. Jonah said no in front of 60 people. "We built this because people deserve to see what was happening to them," he said. "I'm not going to build the thing we hated by hiding this from them now." Nia watched him say it and thought, not for the first time, that the 9-year-old at his mother's kitchen table had never actually left the room. Director Helena Cade arrives at Echo's office in person, unannounced, introducing a federal body no one at Echo has heard of, the Directorate for Market Continuity. She didn't come with a subpoena. She came with a business card and a tone Jonah had never encountered in 18 months of lawyers: patient, almost kind. "Director Helena Cade," she said, "Directorate for Market Continuity. We're not adversarial, Mr. Vance. We're the office that exists so nobody has to find out the hard way what happens when a network like yours fails during a real crisis." Jonah asked how long her office had known Echo existed. Cade smiled and didn't answer that part. Cade presents a formal federal cooperation order, vague in its stated purpose, precise in what it demands, full access to Echo's node mapping architecture, framed as routine oversight. The document ran 4 pages, cited a statute Arthur had never heard invoked outside a classified briefing, and asked for something specific dressed as something general, complete access to Echo's node mapping architecture, for continuity planning purposes. Nia read it twice and said the sentence that would define the episode. They're not asking to look at the network. They're asking to be able to find anyone on it, whenever they want, without telling anyone they did. Cade didn't dispute the description. She just waited. Investigating independently, Layla Anwar uncovers a procurement record. Sterling Capital's data analytics subsidiary held a classified contract with the Directorate for Market Continuity 14 months before Cade's visit. Layla had learned, over 2 prior investigations, that procurement records were the one place government secrecy always left a paper crack. She found Sterling Capital's analytics subsidiary listed in a redacted federal contracts database under a vendor code, awarded 14 months earlier, almost exactly when the shadow index had begun. She didn't have the whole story yet. She had enough to know Marcus Sterling had been building the map long before Director Cade ever knocked on Echo's door. 2 unmarked agents visit Margaret Ilves directly, asking vague questions about her Echo node. The human cost of the shadow index made suddenly, quietly real. Margaret Ilves had taught 4th grade for 31 years and had never in her life been visited by anyone who wouldn't say which agency they represented. They asked about her router, her internet habits, how she'd heard about Echo. They were polite. They left a card with no phone number, same as the one on Jonah's desk 2 states away. She called her son that night, not Echo, because she didn't yet know Echo was the reason any of this was happening to her at all. An anonymous encrypted message reaches Jonah through a channel Echo itself was built to protect, warning that the Directorate's real interest isn't market data at all. The message arrived through Echo's own encrypted node operator channel, the one Jonah had insisted stay open to whistleblowers from the very beginning. It had no name attached. It read, "This was never about flash crashes. Ask her what systemically disruptive actor means, and ask her how long that phrase has existed." Jonah read it 4 times. Then he called Nia, at 2 a.m., and said the sentence that would define the rest of the season. "I don't think we're the threat they're worried about. I think we're the thing they didn't expect to happen to someone they were already watching." Nia lays out the stakes plainly. Echo's founding promise was no single gatekeeper, but a gatekeeper with subpoena power doesn't need to control the network, only the ability to find anyone on it. "We built this so no CEO, no server, no company could be the single point anyone pulls the plug on," Nia said, pacing in front of the whiteboard that still had 3-year-old handwriting on it. "We never designed for a gatekeeper who doesn't need to control the network. Just needs to be able to find one teacher in Dayton, Ohio, whenever they decide to look." Jonah didn't answer right away. He was looking at the same whiteboard sentence that had guided them from the beginning, and realizing for the first time, it might not be enough. Under pressure, Arthur admits he once helped draft classified profiling criteria decades ago meant to flag fraud rings, but never confirmed what, or who, it was quietly repurposed to flag since. Arthur told them the part he'd been avoiding since the 4-page order first landed. 30 years ago, as a young regulator, he'd helped draft internal criteria meant to flag coordinated market manipulation rings before they could do damage. He'd been told, at the time, it targeted organized fraud. He had never been told what it was quietly expanded to flag afterward, or by whom. "I don't know if what I helped build has anything to do with what's happening to you," he said. "I know I never asked hard enough to be sure it didn't." Cade meets Jonah alone, away from lawyers and cameras, and drops the politeness for the first time, revealing a fragment of the truth that reframes the entire season. She found him in a parking garage near Echo's office. No aides, no recorder that either of them could prove existed. "Off the record, because there's no record either of us wants," she said. "You think this started with Echo?" "It didn't." Jonah asked what she meant. Cade studied him for a long moment, the calm never leaving her face. "You were flagged," she said, "before Echo had a name. Before you called it, the signal. I'd be careful assuming you know when your story actually started, Mr. Vance." Then she walked back to her car and didn't look back. The anonymous inside source sends one final image, a single scan page from a classified file, Jonah's name on it, every field redacted except a date that predates Echo's founding by years. The message came in at 11:47 p.m., a time Jonah would spend the rest of his life noticing. One image. A single scan page, most of it blacked out in thick redaction bars, except for a name, his, and a date stamped in the corner that put the document 3 years before Nia ever sat with him in a library, 4 years before Echo's first line of code, 6 years before a folder called The Signal was ever created on a school-issued laptop. Jonah stared at the date until the numbers stopped looking like numbers. Somewhere, a file existed with his name on it before he'd ever done anything to earn one. A season doesn't always start with the enemy you can see. Sometimes it starts with a date on a page you were never supposed to find, proving someone was watching long before you gave them a reason to. Echo survived 4 firms and a courtroom. It had never once had to survive the discovery that the watching started before the watched had a name for himself. Next time on The Silent Disruptor, Jonah goes looking for the beginning of a file he never knew existed, and finds out exactly how long before Echo really was.